We have a guest in the studio. We want to be talking about auctioneers in Kenya. Ndu,
Yes.
as we do this whole thing, please open the page at on the paper that you're holding, on the page that has the auctioneers
I'll do
page.
that.
I'm opening the one on the Standard. City will do the same for the Star.
Right.
Because we want to talk about the auctioneers trade in this country. They are actually regulated. And the person who is joining us in the studio this morning is the chairperson of the Auctioneers Licensing Board. Is the Honorable Peter Gesora. We welcome him the way we welcome our guests by giving him the day's proverb.
Yes, our proverbs for this week come from the country of Angola. Don't despise the nut. One day it will become a palm tree.
Don't despise the nut. One day it will become a palm tree.
Yes. Now the nut we're referring to here isn't the nuts and bolts. Okay? Because the nuts and bolts, even if you bury it under the sun, the best that will happen, it may acquire some rust. That's it. This one is the one which actually is a seed
From the palm tree.
from the palm tree.
Not any other seed. Not
No, the reference here is the palm tree.
The nut here we're talking about is the seed of the palm tree.
Yes, exactly. So,
Okay. Honorable Gesora, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation,
Thank you very much.
the hot seat of the Situation Room.
I'm glad to be here.
Your proverb. What's your interpretation of it? What are the Angolans saying?
My take is that you should not bury probably your talent because one day it will work for you and become a palm and you reap out of it as a fully grown tree, the palm.
Don't just tell yourself, well, this is, it's nothing. It can't be of any use to me.
That, of course, reflects in our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
In the sense that don't bury your talent,
Yeah.
because realize it at the earliest and should be able to work for you in the future. Yes.
Indeed. I'm looking at page 43 of the Standard today, and I'm seeing several adverts here for auctions. Public auction, public auction, public auction. Have you found the pages?
Yes, I have.
How many adverts do you see?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on one page.
What? It's auctions, it's auction, it's auction.
Yep.
Did you know that auctioneers are actually licensed? Did you?
I did not. The impression that is actually given to many, or that we all have, a lot of us have, is that, people you can rock up today, open up a little shop in the middle of town and slap on the sign, Ndu Auctioneers, and then you can get hired by folks or you have to look a little bit more mean than I do, and then, start harassing people who've not done 1, 2, 3 or the other. Licensing, it would have been the farthest thing from my imagination that auctioneers are licensed.
That actually happens. Your Honor, you license auctioneers.
Yes, I do.
First of all, you are a judicial officer.
Yes.
What are you doing licensing auctioneers?
I think to bring you to perspective, it will be very important to lay a background of how the board came to be,
Yes.
as it were. To start with, it's set up by an act of parliament, the Auctioneers Act, Cap 526. If you look at that act, Section 3 of the act sets up the board itself and who is to sit on the board. Section 4 sets out the mandates of the board, which is to license and regulate the trade. Number 2, to entertain complaints against auctioneers and adjudicate on them in a precise way, and a decision is made, which is appealable. Thirdly, to conduct trainings on best practices that have emerged throughout the world in terms of improving the service delivery by auctioneers. And fourthly, there is a sweeping provision that gives the board what we call powers to self-regulate itself in terms of its operations for the betterment of the conduct of the trade in our jurisdiction. So yes, it is there. We have a secretariat, fully fledged secretariat, which is operational from Monday to Friday. And we are housed at Reinsurance Plaza, 4th floor.
City knows.
Hey, you was
Thought he was actually joking. He said, Reinsurance Plaza, 4th floor.
Yes, along Taifa Road.
Yes.
And our offices are open from 8 to 5. And we receive all manner of documents relating to auctioneers, be it applications for renewals, be it complaints, be it documents from our line ministries and the judiciary. And we are a government, semi-government autonomous agency, commonly known as SAGAS, in government. That is to say, a parastatal under the government.
Okay. How does a judicial officer end up chairing this board?
Yes, thank you very much. You realize that auctioneering comes at the tail end of any judicial process. That is to say, a suit has been filed, evidence has been taken, a judgment has been rendered, and the auctioneer kicks in at that stage to execute for the purposes of realizing the fruits of that judgment. And therefore, the framers of the Act are categorical that this being a judicial process, it has to be headed by a judicial officer.
Okay.
And that is clearly spelled out in Section 3 of the said Act.
Okay.
That informs why.
Why the Honorable Peter Gesora is currently the chair.
Yes, and again,
Are you employed by the Judicial Service Commission
Of
or are you
course.
now employed by the SAGA?
I am an employee as a judicial officer of the rank of Chief Magistrate, but at the same time I double up as the chair of that board. You'll realize one thing also, I think, for information, that we don't sit on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
We are not a board like any other board for a company or corporation. Ordinarily, our activities are restricted to 1 week bi-monthly. Okay, that will mean 5 sessions in a year.
Does bi-monthly means once in 2 months
Yes,
or twice?
once in 2 months.
twice in a month.
Twice in a month.
No.
Got it. Yeah.
Once in 2 months.
Okay.
This is on realization that the composition of the board brings on board various actors who are drawn from different organizations and who have a day-to-day mandate to carry out their tasks in their respective organization, and therefore it will not work for us if we are to meet on a day-to-day basis. But the secretariat is on a day-to-day basis, full-time, and therefore that is how we operate.
You know, with the Act, this Act that we speak of, many things that relate to the process of auctioneering changed. Because once upon a time, it was just the wild, wild west. You actually got the impression that auctioneers were a breed apart from every other system. Would I be wrong in saying that they have now been brought under the judiciary?
Exactly. Gone are the days, and I think that is the impression that is out there.
Yes.
That you'd wake up in the morning, you have no roof over your head, or your babies have been thrown out and your belongings, household goods, are being carted away, and you have nowhere, no shelter, for example. On realizing this, there was a hue and cry, and government came to the rescue of Mwananchi by now regulating this position by enacting this act.
Therefore, that must have set in place minimum qualifications for one to be registered as an auctioneer.
Exactly.
And what are those?
Now, there are 2 classes of auctioneers, Class A and Class B. Class A is the lower class, at the entry point, that is to say, where if you want to join the auctioneering trade, then you must have been an apprentice and a seasoned auctioneer who was not less than 10 years standing for a period of 3 years, so that you learn the trade. Thereafter, you will make a formal application to the board, because that's one of our mandates, to license. And upon receipt, there is a checklist that you have to satisfy. That is to say, you must be recommended by a magistrate, you must be recommended by an advocate who is not less than 10 years standing. More importantly, you must be recommended by the auctioneer you've been working under. And that is where the responsibility kicks in terms of authenticating who is this we are admitting onto the auctioneering trade. And just to firm up our position, the board has come up with certain measures to firm up this position. Once you satisfy us with the application, we then subject you to interviews, both written and oral. We test you on matters auctioneering, okay? So that there is strict adherence once we admit you to the law, as it were. Once you pass your written interview, then we call you for an oral interview to touch base with who is this we are talking about. And we field questions, general questions, to see who is this Kenyan. Then thereafter, we also do background checks. If you say you're a graduate of XYZ University, for example, or college, we do write where we think that it is necessary for us to get further information. We write to the said institution to share with us information about the said candidate in terms of did they attend the said institution and what are their qualifications. We also call upon the examination council to assist in giving us background information in terms of the secondary education and the other exams that you may have undertaken.
Would it be wrong to assume then that any auctioneer who is operating in the Republic then is or has passed through this process in order for them to operate?
Yes, the auctioneering business is an old trade, as it were. And until legislation was put in place, there was a bit of confusion as to who is supposed to be licensed. And in fact, it's the provincial administration in those years which would then license auctioneers. It was an haphazard way of doing things. But with the enactment of the Auctioneers Act, it is now more clear as to how we bring on board the auctioneers into the trade.
Is it possible that today there are auctioneers who are operating in the country who have not passed through this process that you've elaborated on?
After the enactment of the Act, all auctioneers have gone through this process. Okay. The others who are slightly older, senior in the trade, were co-opted, and we agreed that there would be no need of subjecting them to that kind of... But that was long, long back. But right now, everybody who is an auctioneer in the last 10, 15 years has gone through this process. Yes.
Do you license individuals or do you license the business?
Now, that is very important, because then when liability kicks in, then you start asking questions such as these ones. To start with, the law says a license is to an auctioneer.
The person.
The person. If Latif comes and says, I want to be an auctioneer, we issue him with a license in his name.
Okay.
But there's a requirement that you have to have a trade name. That is to say, a regulative trading as so-and-so auctioneers. But liability attaches
to the individual.
To the individual. Just like law society, of Kenya would issue a printing certificate to a particular lawyer or advocate for that matter. Anything goes wrong,
it's the individual
who takes
advocate.
personal responsibility.
So when we see, I'm going to give them a public mention because they've spent money on the Standard. So when you see, for example, Beeline Kenya Auctioneers,
Yes.
or Vintage Auctioneers, Vintage is just a business name, a trading name.
Yes.
So how is it registered? Is it registered as...
When you apply to be an auctioneer, you must go to the registrar of trade names, business names, sorry,
Okay.
the Sharia house. You lodge your business name. It goes through a search, and it has to be unique. You cannot share. It has to be unique. Once that happens, then once you have a notification from the registrar of trade names and business name, then you proceed to register your business with them.
Okay.
Then you bring us the certificate at the time of licensing, and we then license you using that trade name.
Can auctioneers form companies? Can it be a limited liability company, limited liability partnership?
Our legislation does not allow for that. Although we have seen various auctioneers holding individual licenses but working under one roof. Are you together?
So that business name, if it's registered, so is it a sole proprietorship?
Yes, it's a sole proprietorship, but you can...
Or is it a partnership?
You can have some sort of partnership where under one trade name, XYZ auctioneers holding the individual licenses work under the same trade name.
Okay. Something I'd like you to explain to us. You said there were two categories of auctioneers.
Yes.
There's the guys at kindergarten where you're still being walked through the process.
Grade
of
A.
Yes, you're walking, crawling, and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you're at that level, what are you allowed to do and what are you not allowed to do?
Thank you very much. That's very critical because at the start, when you're class A, you can only carry out certain businesses. For example, you cannot be allowed to execute court orders as at class A. Yes.
But I thought that's the business of auctioneers.
Yes, because
Wait, there's also the business of just threatening.
because
So you are not allowed to action court orders.
yes, as class A, you can only conduct certain businesses. But as class B, then you're allowed to realize securities. Even class A, you can realize securities, but
Realized security means what exactly?
you can sell property.
Oh, okay.
You take a facility, you're not able to service the facility, so the bank comes calling, for example, or the financial institution, and therefore they realize those securities on behalf of the lender.
That they can do.
That they can do. But they cannot execute court warrants. In Class B, you can
Give an
execute
example
court
of
orders.
court warrant, Your Honor. What is a court warrant? At what point does
Now-
an auctioneer come with a court warrant? And at what
Okay.
point does he come saying,
Let me-
landlord amesema utoke?
No, let me break it down. A court warrant is basically a process that has been undertaken judiciously, a matter that has been heard and determined, a judgment has been rendered, a decree has been generated, and now we are at the stage of execution. So on application by the decree holder, then a warrant of attachment is issued, mandating the auctioneer to go out there, look for the judgment debtors' movables, proclaim them, and at the appropriate time, cut them away with a view of auctioning them to recover the judgment debt. That is how a court warrant comes in.
Okay.
There's a situation where you have refused to pay my rent. We have issued you with notices. Please pay up.
As per the lease?
You have refused. Or probably your situation in life has put you in that
position.
Then the landlord will issue instructions to an auctioneer to carry out distress for rent. In distress for rent, you do not need to go to court as such. He will give you a letter of instruction as an auctioneer. XYZ has refused or has failed, for example, to pay up. Kindly proceed and distress for rent. What would happen is that the auctioneer, upon receipt of the instruction letter, would then register it in the necessary registers and move to the location where the property or where the tenant resides. The landlord would have to point out this is a particular house. Then they proceed to give a notice. If they don't pay up, then a proclamation will issue where your household goods will be,
carted away.
No. Proclaimed.
They itemize it.
Yes, and give the estimated value of those properties.
Which means that they have to force their way into the house.
No, we have not reached there.
Okay. How are they itemizing things that are inside?
Wait.
You're letting them come in and itemize.
You see,
Pole.
Trend pole.
Yes.
if there are times when tenants cooperate and you're able to carry
enter.
out the proclamation.
Okay.
Sometimes the situation can be hostile. The ground is hostile.
Yeah.
Here I have economic hardship, and this auctioneer has landed here. Then they tend to be hostile. In which case, then, the auctioneer has an option. That is to move to court and seek court assistance by saying, allow me to get police assistance to take me to the particular premises for the purposes of carrying out my mandate.
And in such a case, will they then be allowed by law to use force or to get into your premise without your consent?
Again, another catch-22 situation breaks in. You have done the proclamation, yes, but now maybe the tenant in his...
The ground is still hostile.
Is very hostile. He locks up and takes off. You're not able to access the premises.
What do you do?
Again, you go back to court in a miscellaneous application, seeking breaking orders.
As auctioneer or as landlord?
As auctioneer,
Okay.
because you are the officer of the court,
Okay.
as it were. So you have to go back to court, get what we call breaking in orders. And in the breaking in orders, again, the police have to be present. So that even as you break, they have to be very careful on how you handle the properties. You have to take an inventory of what you've carted away. And you have to then carry out the other processes thereafter in terms of advertisement and sale. This inventory has to be signed even by the police so that we authenticate that we were there and we oversaw by keeping peace so that this process, which is a legal process, can be undertaken. So everything is well captured in the Act, and anybody who contravenes this then is subject to a disciplinary course before us.
Well, let's take a break. 27 minutes to 8. This is the Situation Room, and the situation this morning is on auctioneering. The auctioneering trade in Kenya. The Honorable Peter Gesora is the chairperson of the Auctioneers Licensing Board, operating legally to license, regulate, and see and also handle complaints on matters of auctioneering. He's here with us, and we are just about to serve him some Minute Maid because he does quite a lot of work.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We continue the conversation with the Honorable Peter Gesora, who is a chairman of the Auctioneers Licensing Board. You're talking about regulating and overseeing the auctioneering trade in the country. So you said that in addition to licensing, regulating, and all, you also handle complaints. And so you're also a tribunal.
Yes.
Okay. Now, there's a question by Alex Owiti who's actually saying, can auctioneers override the rent tribunal orders?
Thank you very much. Now, the sole mandate of the auctioneering board is to oversee the conduct of the auctioneers in the carrying out of their mandates. We are not there to usurp the powers of any other tribunal or court, as it were. Our mandate is well cut out, and we restrict ourselves to the mandate that is set out in Section 4 of the Act. Just to examine and come up with a decision whether the auctioneer misconducted himself or not. All the other orders issued by the other tribunals and courts are respected. In fact, I'll tell you for free that when we get wind or information in the board that there are parallel proceedings being undertaken in other courts or tribunals, sometimes we shy away from handling those complaints for the time being as we await for the outcome of the other processes that are being undertaken in other courts. For the simple reason, we are likely to fall in a situation where there are two conflicting decisions that come out of both the tribunal and the court. It may be the lower court or the high court, as it were, and it can be very embarrassing, for the judiciary, where everybody flashes their own order. Oh, me have an order from the tribunal, me have an order from the high court. So we try to shy away and give space to the other process being undertaken in other courts to go to full throttle and to the end before we pick it up. Because you realize one thing. For example, a judge may make a holding in his judgment as regards the conduct of the particular auctioneer. Okay? And even order certain sanctions to be meted out to that particular auctioneer. Nothing stops them from doing that. And here you are, probably, you did not know, or you did not know the outcome of that decision, and you've given a contrary
Another order.
So we try as much as possible to do background checks, and where information comes through that there are parallel proceedings, then we put on hold our proceedings to await the outcome of the other proceedings.
So, if we look at a practical situation whereby an individual then is approached by an auctioneer because they've been given orders by, whomever, how does this individual then ascertain that this auctioneer who is coming to them actually is able to act under the orders that they are presenting? What questions ought you to ask before somebody comes and, breaks down your door or whatever? What questions ought you to ask? What should you ask for to be presented to you to confirm that this individual can actually do what they're saying they would?
That they're indeed an auctioneer, even.
In the first place.
Not just some thug.
How do I know that it's not some guy who knows that, okay, because the whole world is afraid when they hear the word auctioneer, that once you present them with something, you're likely to believe what it is that they're saying. How do you ascertain that this individual is in their capacity to act and then do what they're saying they should? And can you refuse that until you get the assurance?
Thank you. A very valid question. And one of the requirements for you to be an auctioneer here is that you have to have an office which is traceable, a physical address where we can trace you. That's number one. Number two, when you arrive in this office, you must demand to be shown, for example, his practice certificate or license for that particular year.
Okay.
To ascertain that truly is licensed for that particular year. Thirdly, you can come to our offices or write to us through email or just walk in and ascertain. Don't forget, we are the custodian of each auctioneer's personal file.
But you honor the fellas at the door right now. The fellas at the door,
Bulky, mean-looking human
I'm not
being.
going to be sending an email when he, So I mean, how do you ascertain all of this?
Every auctioneer has a badge issued by the board.
Okay.
This badge is usually signed by the CEO of the board, and it has particulars of that particular auctioneer, And therefore, by the time they come to cut away your goods, it's a long process. It's not a one-day job. They have to come, tell you, first of all, pay up.
Okay.
Secondly, if you fail to pay up, then they come and proclaim your goods. Up to that point, they have not taken away your goods. And therefore, it gives you room to do background checks, even on your own, and be able to ascertain whether this fellow is duly licensed to carry out the auctioneering business. So it's not a touch and go situation. It takes a bit of time. In fact, not less than 14 days for that kind of action to be undertaken.
Now, these 14 days, I have to ask.
Yes.
14 working days? Well, say
14 calendar
because, I mean,
days.
one sees it in law. You're given 7 days, 14 days, 21 days. How do you count these days?
Days is a day.
Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday, day.
A day, 14 days.
You know, that is clear now.
That's very clear. It's important. Public holiday, now day.
No.
Yeah.
Public holiday, and there is a time between 21st December to 13th January of every particular year where time stops to run. Time stops to run. Statutorily, by the way. And therefore,
Which days are those?
from 21st December of each year
To
to
13th
13th January of the following year, time stops to run.
Meaning what? They cannot
They
operate
cannot.
If you have
operate.
7 days and they begin on the 20th,
of December.
Time
Yeah.
stops to run.
Day two.
Day two is 14th
January.
of
Yes,
January.
yes.
Okay.
And that is provided for in law and statute, and even judicial judges go on vacation during that period.
Does it also apply to other services like water and electricity?
No. Even for us as judicial officers, we continue working.
You go to a hotel, you book for 2 nights.
Even us as judicial
Night 1
officers.
is 20th. Night 2 is 14th.
In the meantime,
Yeah, so that is a position. It's not a touch and go situation.
okay.
And Kenyans should be comforted that you will have sufficient time to
Yeah.
be able to then sort out yourself in doing background checks.
For the first time ever, I think we're hearing, and because look, nobody can run away from the fact or the overbearing emotion when you hear what people have gone through when it comes to auctioneers, whether it is the fear alone of just hearing the word. How then, because then what I hear you saying is that you're trying to then disabuse these auctioneers from this fear that people feel when they hear it. But I mean, it's not a nice thing to hear that somebody wants to come and cut your things away. But I hear you also then saying that at the same time, you should also know that this group of practitioners then will be guided by law. However, the overbearing thing is still fear. How do you then disabuse the process from the fear that people feel?
I think this is a notion that was created a long time ago and is still stuck with us. But I'll tell you for free, this situation has changed considerably. There are very many auctioneers who are very decent. They've gone to school, they have etiquette, and they conduct themselves with very serious and high decorum. And they're also human beings. And over time, through our trainings, we've been able to disabuse this kind of notion that these are people who are, thuggish, mean-looking. You will be shocked. So many, in fact, over 70% of our auctioneers, even the way they dress themselves, you will just be proud of them. Most of them appear before us. We meet them in seminars, and they're very decent and good, nice looking. And but more still needs to be done.
Sure.
More still to be done, because we are not saying we are not that we are out of the woods.
Okay. There's a question that's really direct now about a process. What if my husband owes and auctioneers come for items in my house which I have paid for? Are they allowed to touch what I have paid for and I'm not part of that debt?
Of course, there's a thin line there. And let's be very practical. There's a very thin line there. Here you are, you're a couple staying under one roof.
Well, you're staying under one roof, yes.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yes.
You've bought property or equipment. How then would an auctioneer know that this is Mrs. So-and-so's goods? It's for you to come up and say, for example, I'm not part of this debt,
Yes.
and this is my property. And there's proof that this is my property. So that then due process kicks in terms of not putting you into hardship, in terms of now cutting away your property.
So you can separate the two.
Of course, but as I say, it's usually
So
a very thin line.
How do you prove that the fridge is not
I have
his,
the
it's
receipts.
yours, or yours is not his? The receipt does not have your name, does it?
I have the transaction that came from mine. I mean, look, if people want to get to the nitty gritty where they want to prove that, I think at the end of the day,
Could-
the
there
thing
could
is,
be collusion
don't
here
rope
between-
me into your thing.
There could be collusion as well with the couple,
Sure,
saying,
but
"Wewe
can
sema
you-
kila kitu wewe ndio ulinunua."
Right.
Yes. And again, if it's a court process that has been undertaken against Mr. XYZ, okay, judgment has been entered against him, and you feel that the goods that have been proclaimed belong to you, who is not involved in the dispute, there is nothing wrong in filing what we call objection proceedings.
Right.
That is provided on the civil procedure rules, where you now say, let's separate this thing. These goods that were proclaimed do not belong to the judgment debtor. And the courts will make a finding. In fact, the law says that once you file objection proceedings, you get an automatic stay. Automatic stay at the very outset.
Once you file an objection,
Objection proceedings,
yeah,
you get an automatic stay at that stage. Without no further action can be taken against that property until it is sorted out as to who it belongs to.
Right.
Okay? So that, but we also know until 2010, before the rules were amended, that somebody would get then objection, that order, automatic stay, which is ex parte, and then go to slumberland, as it were. But now the rules on realizing this have now set up timelines within which you prosecute those proceedings, those objection proceedings, so that you also don't put the decree holder to hardship in terms of realizing the fruits
Waiting
of
for
their
their
judgment.
justice.
Yes. So that is sorted out.
But Gesora, so there, I'm going to ask this question in a long roundabout way, but there's several questions maybe in one. Number one, you have licensed the individual auctioneer, and the auctioneer, as you expect for him to be coaching future auctioneers, he'll employ people who'll work under him. Are there minimum qualifications or minimum standards of those people who work under him? Because we see auctioneers coming with thugs, people we call thugs. So, jumping on to the next side, we see in the news cases where auctioneers have descended on a property. This property, there's been dispute over ownership of this property. Maybe the judgment has gone a certain way, and on a certain day, auctioneers have descended on this property with their thugs, and they've come to destroy. Basically, they have thrown somebody's goods out, and they have brought down walls and roof property. These are complaints I'm sure that you've heard in your tribunal. What is it that goes amiss there? What parts of regulations have you allowed, and what is disallowed?
Thank you very much, Eric. This is a very touchy issue to the public and even investors, as it were. And some of them are shying away from coming to a jurisdiction because they do not know what's going to happen to them next. As earlier indicated, a license is to an auctioneer. That's number one. It's a rule of the thumb. You take personal responsibility for the actions that you're going to undertake. There are no real qualifications set out in the Act as to who you employ. But you realize that when people are undertaking some of these activities, they would hire a few people from the wood, you know, on a temporary basis to then carry out those instructions. But the final responsibility rests on the auctioneer to be able to guide as to what is to be done and what is not to be done, because he will take personal responsibility for that. Secondly, matters demolition and eviction are very touchy now. Of late, we've had a few incidences which have left a bitter taste in everybody's mouth, including myself as chair. Let me tell you one thing. The law is very clear that if you want to get an eviction order, you must file a suit, a proper suit in court, which suit shall be subject to a full hearing, whether the defendant enters appearance or not. Underline that. For one reason or another, the defendant may have omitted and or probably just neglected to file a defense. But nevertheless, that matter must still go for full hearing, where evidence is adduced, viva voce evidence, so that a finding is made, a formal finding by way of judgment is made by the judge or the judicial officer in that respect. It is as a result of that that you now proceed to the next level, where the judge will say, eviction orders to issue as per whatever I'm seeing here.
Okay.
But even then, the courts have been very cautious, and the High Court has guided us in a myriad of determination that you don't issue a judgment today and tomorrow I'm evicting you. Say, for example, in a rural setup where you are evicting somebody from a piece of land, but he had planted crops for that season.
Right.
Do you just unleash what you have called those people to just go into the land, slash down all the crop, and evict, as it were? Courts have been sympathetic, and we have given timelines within which the eviction is to be carried out. We have given notices, sufficient time to the JD, the judgment debtor, to be put on notice that, look, there's a judgment against you. You need to move out of this land or house, and failure which you have been given probably 90 days, 6 months, as it were, depending on the discretion of the judicial officer or the judge. And we are now coming for you. So you are not caught in a crossfire. You're not caught by surprise that a judgment was passed, and then now people have come the following day to evict me. You might as well find yourself that service was not effected on you of that summons for that suit. And therefore it will put you in a disadvantageous position if somebody is to come, yet you are not in the know as to what exactly transpired. So that gives you a chance to even go back to court and say, look, no, the eviction orders given are ex parte erroneous, because I was never served with summons to enter appearance. I think my rights will be prejudiced if this eviction is allowed to continue.
Yeah.
Secondly, once that eviction order is issued, eviction does not amount to demolition. You know, that's one aspect where we get it wrong. So that we've had very bizarre situations. Very bizarre. Where, for example, an auctioneer goes on a Thursday afternoon to a court with a miscellaneous application. It looks very innocent on the face of it.
Yeah.
Very, very innocent. Says, okay, help me. I want to levy distress. That is a Thursday. It's a typical example I'm just giving you so that you see where Kenyans are coming from. Innocently, the judicial officer say, oh, you want to carry out distress? Oh, he peruses through the instruction letter and issues that order, that police assist.
Yep.
Okay? That is on a Thursday. On Friday afternoon, the drama starts.
Yeah.
The said auctioneer lands in the locus and unleashes terror. It's a Friday afternoon. And he ends up, instead of distress, ends up actually evicting and demolishing the house.
The house.
Now, these are acts which are criminal in nature.
Bas.
They are criminal in nature, and Kenyans need to be in the know that the other relevant agencies must kick in and arrest this situation. Of course, we have seen situations where police officers are allocated to this auctioneer. They go on site. Another group comes. Maybe now the tenant has gone to another police station.
Another police station with their own officers.
And then another batch comes. And all of a sudden, as it happened recently, the new group of officers, probably a phone call comes from somewhere, and they step down.
And they clash.
And they don't clash. They go away.
Honorable Gesora, I am sorry I have to cut you short, but we've gotten the point. But you have to come back and now tell us about all the other disputes that you deal with in your tribunal.